Nathaniel Hawthorne was an American transcendentalist born in Salem, Massachusetts on July 4, 1804 and died May 19, 1864. He was born into a Puritan family to Nathaniel and Elizabeth Manning Hawthorne. He married Sophia Peabody in 1842. The first novel Nathaniel Hawthorne created was Fanshawe in 1828. It was about Hawthorne's college life in Fanshawe, and it did not gather much success. In fact, he ended up burning the unsold copies in bitterness. Another major work of his was the Blithedale Romance in 1852. Hawthorne's most famous work is The Scarlet Letter in 1850. The Scarlet Letter takes place in a 17th century New England in the town of Dimmesdale. Adulterer Hester Prynne had an affair waiting for her husband to sail from England, whom they presumed was lost at sea. Hester was accused of her crimes of adultery, and she and her daughter Pearl attempt to escape and become isolated from the city of Dimmesdale in order to prevent Hester from becoming humiliated for her adulterous act. The Scarlet Letter was about the idea that sin, adultery in this case, results in the isolation of the sinners. Hawthorne wrote The Scarlet Letter while feeling isolated, using the novel to reflect his feelings. A famous quote from The Scarlet Letters is, "No man, for any considerable period, can wear one face to himself and another to the multitude, without finally getting bewildered as to which may be the true." Hawthorne was born and lived his adolescence in the era of the New Nation, but most of his life is spent in the era of national expansion and reform. This era of reform brought anti-slavery and women's rights movements, and Hawthorne's work reflected the aspect of reform in a religious and moral context, since slavery and women's rights are directly connected to equal human rights. In the era of reform and national expansion, there have been many temperance movements to legally ban alcoholic beverages in 1830s and 1840s. Also, the Second Great Awakening relates to Hawthorne's moral romance. He spoke out against theism with determinism, the idea that all our actions were because of an external force acting upon us. The Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention and the Declaration of Sentiments also reflected the era of reform and human rights. Lastly, the formation of the Anti-Slavery Society in 1833 sought to allow African Americans to have the same rights and liberties as a U.S. citizen. We should read Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing today because he touches on the darker side of human nature, especially with the idea of an active evil, the devil, working against us to pull us into sin. His form of writing he calls romance is defined as a method of showing the depths of our common nature. Hawthorne taught in his writing that confronting reality and not avoiding it is the only way to understand the human nature, and reading his novels would open up your eyes to the reality of the human nature. Nathaniel Hawthorne is known as one of the most modern of writers and inspires future authors through his works. Fellow transcendentalist Herman Melville dedicated his work Moby Dick to Nathaniel Hawthorne, who he considered his friend. Also, his use of pre-Freudian psychological analysis interests people today in reading his thoughts in the romantic novels that reflected his life and attitude. After Hawthorne's death, his works continued to inspire writers like Henry James, William Faulkner, and Robert Penn Warren. Nathaniel Hawthorne's last name was actually Hawthorne without a W, and he added the W to distinguish himself from his family, more specifically his ancestor John Hawthorne, for he was one of the 3 judges in the Salem witch trials, and Hawthorne did not want to be known for his ancestors' work as a judge.